Elon Musk has become one of the leading figures in the right-wing attack on trans rights. And speaking to Jordan Peterson, he explained why.
It happened to one of my older boys, where I was essentially tricked into signing documents for one of my older boys, Xavier. This is before I had really any understanding of what was going on, and we had COVID going on, and so there was a lot of confusion. I was tricked into doing this, and it wasn't explained to me that puberty blockers are actually just sterilization drugs. Anyway, and so I lost my son essentially. They call it dead naming for a reason.
Yeah,
all right. So the reason it's called dead naming is because your son is dead. So my son Xavier is dead, killed by the woke mind virus.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that would be like.
Yeah.
Now, it's important to be clear here. Elon Musk's child is not dead. She's a 20-year-old who has changed her name to Vivian Jenner Wilson. By all accounts, seems to be living a happy life. Elon Musk is referring to her as dead. Now, obviously, that's not where the word dead naming comes from. It's the name which is dead, not the person. Helena, watching that, I mean, whatever you think about puberty blockers, and I haven't, we've discussed it on the show with various experts. The idea that you can, in public, speak to the world, to millions of people, and say such a thing about your child who is going to see that clip, I just think is psychopathic. I just think it shows you're such a terrible parent, I think, if you go on, because of a decision your child has made, you refer to them as dead. It is just beyond belief that someone would think that is a reasonable thing to say in public.
I mean, it's actually very frequent that these kind of things happen. Parents will, someone their child will come out as transgender, for example, and they've always, had this perception of their child as being the child of the gender that they were born as, and all of the memories that they have of that child, and say, well, if they're not going to exist in that, in that way moving forward, then I guess it feels like a part of them has died. Lots of parents get over that very easily, but it's clear in Elon Musk's case, he hasn't got over it at all, and I think that it's really changed him as a person. And we think we've seen this before. The one kind of way in this is manifested a lot in terms of the discourse around trans people specifically is this idea of rapid onset gender dysphoria. It's a nonsense term essentially that's been made up to say that a bunch of people are just coming out transgender with no prior knowledge as to why they would do. Nothing was to tell, just to signify to anybody that they were trans before this moment, and then they've suddenly been quote unquote infected by the woke mind virus, and they've come out as trans because it's like the word they use is social contagion. People have used this in the Commons as well. They've described it as a social contagion. It's very similar to the ways in which the people from the far right of politics have described how gay people do that to society as well in the 80s, for example. And when they feel like this has been lost to you, it's been stolen from you and taken away by people who you believe have medicalized them unnecessarily, or people who have influenced them outside, they do genuinely feel like that something has been lost. They have lost something forever. And I'm like, well, the person is still the same person that they are. They're living in a kind of a different gender at this point. And I think it really comes through into the way in which he kind of essentially has changed his perception. Him talk about it being the woke mind virus. I hate to talk about it to Twitter again, but the way in which he has changed how the rules around misgendering on Twitter. He's even described the word cisgender to be flagged as hate speech on Twitter. Now, that's just a scientific term to prevent people who aren't transgender. But it's clear that something has hurt him so much that he genuinely believes this idea that there's some kind of outside force that's changed everybody else, rather than it being some kind of latent expression of someone being trans. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. It's a very busy man. People cannot pay attention to somebody who is expressing gender dysphoria or the signs of gender dysphoria before then. And if you buy into the kind of conspiracy theories that Elon Musk and the people who support him do. It's very easy to be able to say, well, the doctor's been bought out by the trans lobby. That's a word that's been used in the British papers a lot about trans people, that all of these medical associations that support the use of puberty blockers or don't oppose it, or support gender affirming care, or like the affirmative model that was pushed back on in the Cass review, for example. They say, well, these have been caught up by some outside force. This is why people have been suing Stonewall, for example, saying, well, loads of the institutions have been captured by gender ideology. And if you genuinely feel like there is this fifth column that's taken your child away from you, that can make you do and say things that you wouldn't otherwise have done. Like Elon Musk wasn't this; it was a bit kooky, but he was never this kind of viscerally engaged in kind of conspiracy theory posting in terms of what he does. I mean, this man has essentially become addicted to social media, and he does it to post conspiracy theories like George Soros style stuff as well. And I think that his inability to come to terms with the fact that his child is transgender is something that is a really large part of why that he's turned into somebody who is a real kind of spokesperson for far right politics, and that's very dangerous.
Yeah, and I think just to speak about it in that way publicly just proves he's a terrible, terrible father. Like I can understand. I mean, I think if you're a parent and your kid is trans, you should get very quickly used to your kid being trans and welcome them in whatever identity they want to sort of express themselves as. But I can imagine how for some parents it might be confusing, it might be distressing in some way. To go on a podcast to millions of people and say that your child has been killed by the woke mind virus and that they're now dead, I just think is, whatever your reading of the evidence when it comes to people transitioning when they're young, that's just a despicable, disgusting thing to do. And I think it speaks sort of to how extreme and kind of anti-human some of these people are. It's just, I found it just so grotesque, a sort of comment in an interview from Elon Musk. And I did find that quite instructive, really.